According to alerts from public safety agencies across the country, U.S. cell phone customers of AT&T were unable to dial 911 Wednesday night. In an email alert, authorities stated, AT&T is experiencing a nationwide outage which is affecting 911 calls. One AT&T representative reported the company was aware of a service issue and was working to fix it. The email statement apologized to all affected. In a message typical of alerts by other public safety agencies, the Seminole County Sheriff's Office in Florida posted its regular 10-digit phone number on Twitter. They requested local residents dial that in an emergency.
Israel's legislature passed preliminary bills that may restrict Muslim calls to prayer. On March 8th, legislators in Israel's Knesset passed two preliminary bills that would prohibit the amplification of calls to prayer. The proposed laws refer generally to houses of worship, but some are calling them muezzin laws, referring to the man who chants the Muslim call to prayer. One of the proposed laws would ban calls to prayer over loudspeakers between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. This would effectively mute the call to dawn prayer, one of the 5 daily Muslim calls to prayer. The second bill would ban amplification in residential areas at all times. Violators could be fined 10,000 shekels or about $2,700. Proponents of the bill say they're about quality of life, but some Arab lawmakers claim the bills are racist. The bills have several more stages to pass before they can become laws. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Kimberly Caldwell.
Israel has passed a law banning anyone who supports a boycott on Israel from entering the country. The Israeli parliament approved the measure on Monday, March 6th. According to The Independent, the ban will apply to anyone who, quote, knowingly issues a public call for boycotting Israel that has a reasonable possibility of leading to the imposition of a boycott. It would also apply to all those who call for a boycott of Israeli institutions or, quote, areas under its control. This includes Israel's settlements in Palestinian territory, which The Independent says are regarded as illegal under international law. The law would apply to supporters of the Boycott, Divest and Sanctions Movement, or BDS, who oppose Israel's policies in regards to Palestine. Opponents of the ban say it limits free speech, and Haaretz reports they worry it will affect thousands of Palestinians living as temporary residents in Israel. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Matt Paul.
As women around the world wore red in solidarity with International Women's Day, crowds in Ireland donned black and went on strike to protest against the country's restrictive abortion laws. Traffic ground to a halt in parts of Dublin Wednesday as women and abortion rights activists sang along to Cyndi Lauper's "Girls Just Want to Have Fun." Demonstrators banged pots and pans and chanted, "Same struggle, same fight. Women's rights are workers' rights."
Planned Parenthood President and CEO Cecile Richards says the Republican proposal to replace Obamacare is a war on women's health care. Specifically, the bill aims to discontinue all federal funding for organizations that provide abortions, with a few exceptions. Currently, the federal government provides $500 million yearly. The money is reimbursed for health care services, allowing the organization to function in a similar manner as hospitals and doctors related to women's health care. Richards says Planned Parenthood is not being funded by the government for terminating pregnancies, as it is illegal to do so. They are, however, reimbursed for pap smears, cancer screenings, birth control, and more.
Reuters reports that a Texas Senate committee on Wednesday approved a bill that would restrict access to public bathrooms for transgender people after hundreds of people lined up to testify on legislation that critics said promotes discrimination. The bill, which would require people to use restrooms that correspond with the gender on their birth certificate, not with their gender identity, now heads to the Republican-controlled Senate, where it is expected to pass. Republican Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who guides the agenda in the Senate, has said it is a priority piece of legislation. But nearly 70 businesses, including some of the state's biggest employers, such as American Airlines, sent a letter to Republican leaders this month to reject the bill that they said would, quote, legalize discrimination.
Reuters reports that Out Vets, a gay veterans group that marched in the past two editions of Boston's St. Patrick's Day Parade, said the event's organizers have voted to exclude them from the march, reigniting a fight over cultural inclusion in the annual event. Organizers of the parade, the largest marking St. Patrick's Day in the country, had long excluded openly gay groups from participating, saying that doing so would conflict with the parade organizers' Roman Catholic heritage. But they backed down in 2015 in the face of intense public pressure. Boston Mayor Marty Walsh had boycotted the event during the time that gays were excluded, and some sponsors pulled out in protest over the exclusion of gay marchers. A representative for Walsh did not immediately respond to a request for comment on whether the group's exclusion would cause him to rethink his participation in the parade.
According to a new study this week, an earthquake fault in California from San Diego Bay to Los Angeles has the capability of producing a magnitude 7.4 earthquake. The study adds that the fault poses an especially significant hazard to coastal Southern California and Tijuana, Mexico. Valerie Shakian, the study's lead author, says that even a moderate quake on the fault could have a major impact on the region. She also added in a statement this week, this system is mostly offshore, but never more than 4 miles from the San Diego, Orange County, and Los Angeles County coast.
The island of Bali has decided not to cover statues for the visit of Saudi Arabia's King Salman. The Saudi monarch is visiting Bali for vacation as part of his tour aimed at building ties with Asia. Statues had been covered with cloth or hidden during the monarch's visit with Indonesian President Joko Widodo at a palace in Bogor near the capital of Jakarta. According to AFP, strict interpretations of Islam forbid the creation of images of living beings. Bali is a majority Hindu island in Indonesia, the world's most populous Muslim-majority country. The island features many statues of Hindu deities and naked women. In an article published March 3rd by Tribune Bali, Governor Made Mangkupastika said, quote, Bali is famous for being comfortable, safe, and tolerant, so we will leave it as is. A local government spokesman has said they have not received a request from the Saudis regarding the statues. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Matt Paul.
Brussels is resigned to losing part of the EU's western flank as Britain hands the European Union its formal notice to quit this month. The EU capital, however, is increasingly stressed that upset in the east is pulling the survivors further apart. Poland is the biggest of the ex-communist eastern states to join after the Cold War. The country has picked a fight over the fairly minor matter of who chairs EU summits. The spat will overshadow a meeting this week that was meant to forge post-Brexit unity, symptomatic of a mounting East-West friction. As leaders struggle to quell popular disaffection with the EU that is by no means confined to Britain, Brexit has not created that friction but made it worse. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said the United States and North Korea are heading for a collision like two accelerating trains with neither side willing to give way. He cautioned the U.S. against the deployment of a controversial missile defense system in South Korea. That system is vehemently opposed by China. He also had strong words for North Korea and said Pyongyang should suspend its nuclear weapons program. Chinese warnings come during a week where North Korea launched 4 ballistic missiles and the U.S. deployed the first components of the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense Missile System in South Korea.
President Trump's administration is weighing a deployment of up to 1,000 American soldiers to Kuwait. According to Reuters, U.S. officials said the troops may serve as a reserve force in the fight against Islamic State, as U.S.-backed fighters accelerate the offensive in Syria and Iraq. The option has not been previously reported. Proponents said it would provide U.S. commanders on the ground greater flexibility to quickly respond to unforeseen opportunities and challenges on the battlefield. It was unclear whether the proposal had the support of U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, who could opt to use other tools to give commanders more agility. Trump has made defeating Islamic State one of the key goals of his presidency. The president's push against the Islamic State in Syria could soon present him with an unenviable decision on whether to risk alienating NATO ally Turkey by relying on the U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces. In addition to Arabs, the SDF includes Kurdish YPG fighters.
On Wednesday, a federal judge in Honolulu announced that Hawaii will become the first state to file a lawsuit challenging President Trump's revised travel ban. The order bars new visas for people from 6 predominantly Muslim countries and temporarily disables the U.S. refugee program. A day after the new executive order was announced, Hawaiian attorneys filed a motion asking that the state's original lawsuit be allowed to proceed. A representative for the state maintains that the ban harms Hawaii's Muslim population. tourism, and foreign students.
On Tuesday, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres warned that the crisis facing the Somali people had been neglected by the world and warned that the country is on the verge of suffering a catastrophic famine. Currently, over 6 million people, or more than half of Somalia's population, are in desperate need of food assistance. The impending famine, along with a severe drought and the presence of Al-Shabaab, a terrorist group, has left the country and its people in a desperate situation. In 2011, more than 250,000 people died during a famine. The United Nations says that more than half died before the famine was even declared. Guterres told CNN, "Let's not forget that each one of these people is an individual case of extreme suffering. There is a moral obligation for all of us to do everything we can to support these people."
A senior defense official confirmed that military intelligence believes ISIS leader Abu al-Baghdadi abandoned Mosul prior to the battles to isolate the Iraqi city 5 months ago. The official also stated that the terror group has approximately 15,000 fighters between Iraq and Syria and currently maintains 2,500 in West Mosul and Tal Afar, where most of the fighting is now taking place. Reuters reported that Baghdadi left Mosul's command to a group of die-hard followers and is likely hiding out in the desert with sympathetic civilians and now focusing on survival.
According to Breitbart, the heavily migrant-populated Swedish city of Malmö has grown by almost 6,000 people in the last year. Authorities say the driving force behind the increase is mass migration, predominantly from Middle Eastern nations. In addition to the new arrivals, the city also experienced significant emigration. Around 1,510 Danes moved away from Malmö in 2016, while only 1,040 arrived in the city, shrinking the total number of Danes living in the city, which is just across the border from Denmark.
In Manila, Philippines, hundreds of activists from left-wing women's groups protested Wednesday at the U.S. Embassy. Before joining a bigger rally outside the presidential palace, they burned a mock U.S. flag with President Donald Trump's image. In both rallies, they demanded an end to the presence of visiting U.S. troops and a crackdown against illegal drugs by President Rodrigo Duterte. The crackdown has left thousands of drug suspects dead. The protesters hid a huge paper mask made in the likeness of Duterte. They ranted against an array of issues, including a lack of jobs, poverty, and violence against women. The approval on Tuesday by the House of Representatives of a bill to reimpose the death penalty for drug offenses was also a focus of protest.
Children under the age of 16 won't be able to go to the new Disney film Beauty and the Beast in Russia because it includes a gay character. A Russian law prohibits the spreading of gay propaganda among minors. According to the BBC, the decision comes after a Russian lawmaker, Vladimir Medinsky, petitioned to ban it over the inclusion of a gay character. Medinsky was also the driving force behind the measure that banned the distribution of homosexual propaganda to minors in 2013. The star-struck cast includes Emma Watson playing Belle, and the scene in question is played by Josh Gad for the character of Lee Fo and Lee Evans playing Gaston. It's not the first time the film has caused controversy. Cited in the New York Times last week, a drive-in theatre in rural Alabama declared that it would also refuse to screen the movie. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Rachel Latham.
Researchers from the University of California at San Diego have developed a new method for 3D printing blood vessel networks, which may help pave the way for transplants using lab-grown tissues and organs. These fabricated blood vessel networks mimic the human body's natural blood vessels, which transport nutrients, blood, and metabolic waste. While 3D printed networks similar to this have been printed before, they were extremely expensive and time-consuming to print, not to mention less compatible with a living creature. However, according to an article in Digital Trends, the new method developed by the UCSD lab can fabricate blood vessels in just a few seconds as opposed to hours. Currently, the blood vessels have been successfully tested on mice, and it seems likely that human trials will follow shortly.
Think pink, or like some residents in the Canadian province of Alberta, drink pink. On March 6th, residents in the small town of Onaway saw their tap water run pink. According to UPI, some residents were fine with it, but others were more cautious. One resident said, quote, "I'm not going to drink this. I'm not going to risk it." The town issued a statement several hours after receiving reports of the colorful surprise, explaining that a faulty valve allowed potassium manganate into the water supply. The chemical is commonly used to remove iron and other substances from water. The mayor said there was never a health risk. According to the BBC, the World Health Organization says potassium manganate can cause skin irritation, but there were no reported adverse effects. CBC News Edmonton reports one resident said, quote, "I know spring is in the air, but spring in the taps? Come on." For Newsbeat Social, I'm Kimberly Caldwell.
Thousands marched through the streets of Dublin on International Women's Day, protesting the country's abortion ban. The protest on Wednesday, March 8th, was named Strike for Repeal. It called on the government to hold a referendum over Ireland's 8th Amendment, which bans abortions, even in cases of rape, incest or threat of harm to the mother. It is only legal if the mother's life is in immediate danger. While people around the world wore red for International Women's Day, many of the Irish protesters wore black for their cause. Government statistics from the United Kingdom show that at least 9 Irish women travelled to England and Wales every day in 2015 to have abortions. The United Nations Human Rights Committee called on Ireland to reform its abortion laws last June, and CNN says the Citizens' Assembly will make recommendations about abortion reform to the government in April. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Rachel Latham.
Thousands of women took to the streets in Warsaw, Poland to show red cards to the country's conservative government and to demand higher pay, full birth control rights, and respect. The protest was part of International Women's Day. Protests like the one in Warsaw were held in approximately 80 towns and cities throughout Poland. Hollywood actress Jessica Chastain joined one of the protests in Warsaw.
The makers of Tinder, the popular dating app where you swipe left or right to reject or accept potential dates, have developed a new app. This app is exclusively for celebrities and other wealthy users. This members-only version of Tinder is called Tinder Select, and it is intended to serve elite users such as CEOs, supermodels, and other affluent people looking for potential dates.
Uber's self-driving cars are being tested in California, but don't expect to ride in one anytime soon. According to the California Department of Motor Vehicles, Uber has been granted a permit to test autonomous cars on public roads. The permit promises a smoother path for Uber, which had a rocky reception from the DMV during its self-driving car launch in December.
According to a new memo, the U.S. Border Patrol's parent agency would exempt many veterans and law enforcement officers from a higher requirement to take a lie detector test. The plan comes as an effort to satisfy Donald Trump's order to add at least 5,000 agents. According to the Associated Press in January, around 2/3 of Border Patrol job applicants fail the agency's polygraph, which is more than double the average rate of other law enforcement agencies. The lie detector test failures are also said to be a big reason why the number of U.S. Border Patrol agents recently fell below 20,000 for the first time since 2009.
On Wednesday, portions of Alligator Alley in Florida remained closed amid smoky conditions from a wildfire that continues to scorch southwest Florida. The Florida Highway Patrol reports that motorists must identify alternative routes when traveling on Interstate 75, which runs between Naples on Florida's Gulf Coast through Fort Lauderdale and the Atlantic coast. Speaking to CBS Florida affiliate Wink TV, Lieutenant Gregory Bueno said, "Our troopers are continually going up and down the interstate. We're looking for any spots where the flames could potentially cross over the interstate." On Tuesday, the highway was closed due to a 6,000-acre brush fire in Collier County, causing almost zero visibility on that stretch of road.
Military helicopters were deployed on Wednesday to battle wildfires raging across Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. At least 6 people were killed by the fires, fueled by hot weather, strong winds, and low humidity. According to authorities, the blazes were the largest in the histories of both Kansas and Oklahoma. The National Weather Service's Storm Prediction Center have announced that severe fire conditions could continue across the region until Sunday. No causes for the fires have been established.
Utah is set to have the toughest standards in the U.S. for drinking and driving. The state legislature on Wednesday passed a bill lowering the legal limit to 0.05% blood alcohol content, down from the 0.08% that is generally standard in the U.S. Utah is unique in its majority population of Mormons who, as part of their faith, do not drink alcohol. There's also zero tolerance for drivers under the age of 21 who cannot legally drink. If signed into law as expected, the new standard would go into effect December 30th, 2018.